Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, it's your host, Sean. We belly back up to the bar here. It's Wednesday. I don't even know what day of the week. I think it's what day? Oh, it's January 24th. I forgot what day of the week it was. So we've bellied back up to the bar. It must be like service month because we had another Marine 2 weeks ago and Marine before that, a week before that. So today we brought a cab driver with us. And if you don't know what that is, that would be a sailor. So because they drive the big gray taxis. And if you've heard me talk about my grandfather, he always said, as Marines, we look like bellhop. So we had to bring a sailor out here with us. But joining us, and I didn't even ask him where he's at. He has probably one of the better backgrounds I've seen it in a while. It looks very professional. So if you're not on our live, make sure you're checking that out. A very, very clean look to it. Joining us and he'll tell us here in a minute wherever he's at, Mr. Michael Cinquino.
Yeah. Sean, thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely, brother. So where are you at? I forgot.
I'm in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
So you're not far from me at all.
Where I don't even know where you're at.
Albany, New York.
Oh, no shit. Okay.
Yeah, you're not
far. We know the cold, man.
Oh yeah, I know you know the cold. We get cold. It's like 25. It's like everybody was like, it's balmy. It's 35 degrees out today. You guys have but you guys also I think what is it? Bar Harbor, Maine is one of those weird ones that the jet. Welcome to Weather Talk with Sean, where the jet comes real close to the shores there, so they don't get the crazy cold and snow like the rest of the state does. Because they get
we're actually new to New Hampshire. I'm from New York.
What part?
Brooklyn. So we moved from Brooklyn, New York to Portsmouth, New Hampshire in kind of 2021. Really came out here in 2020, moved here in 2021. And it's a little bit different than living in Brooklyn, I got to say.
You mean you can't walk 2 blocks in any direction and find anything you need?
No.
You have to drive everywhere now?
So here's the thing, Sean. So it is close proximity stuff, but there's just something about walking like 3/4 of a mile, not in a city, where you automatically look like a hobo. Yes. Meaning, you know what I'm saying? I visited Texas. It's like 6 city blocks, but you're the only guy walking on the side of the road. City blocks.
Yeah, so nobody else.
So you look like a hitcher or drifter or hobo or something like that. So while there is proximity, you got to get in the car.
The police are going to stop you and wonder what you're doing. Yeah, no, I understand completely.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to get into more of this talk here in a moment, folks, but let's go ahead and do some quick house cleaning, as we always should. So as always, over my right shoulder, we got the big board for Sticker and a Cause. Maybe you've got your own podcast, you've got your own speaking engagements, business, band. I don't care what it is. Reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, even our email. It's all the Above the Bar podcast at gmail.com for our email. Reach out. Let me know what you got going on. I'll give you the address where to send your stuff to. You send it out to me. We read about it free here on the air. As you can see, it's a big week coming up also. We've got the big Raven sign on the big sticker and a cause board. So let's see what happens with that. I'm not going to say much because I don't want to jinx myself. Joining us over on Instagram. I can see you guys on Instagram, Stacy and Daniel. How are you guys doing over there? If everybody knows now, I look to the left because I got Instagram. It's weird. Instagram people can talk to me over here, but they can't message me like everybody else does. I have to see their messages over here. It's a whole thing with them. But the other side to this is we got to always talk about our sponsors, and that's Budget Blinds of East Greenbush and Budget Blinds of Hudson and Coxsackie, New York. What would you consider Albany? Is it upstate, or what do you call it?
Well, that's got to be upstate, right?
No. See, I don't call it upstate. After living here long enough, if you're not up by Lake Placid and above.
Yes, I guess the lower you are, the more upstate it is. So I was born in Rockland County, New York.
Okay.
So that's right over the New Jersey border. And even, I guess, I never know. I'm was I born upstate in Rockland County? It's 8 miles.
See, that's like the people if you're in Westchester County, or not Westchester County, but Yonkers, you're upstate to some of those people. It's like, no, it's like a suburb of the city. But nonetheless, our sponsors, Budget Blinds of East Greenbush and Budget Blinds of Hudson and Coxsackie, New York, the largest custom window treatment company in the world. They have operations in Canada and the United States. And coming up in the month of February, so just next month, they are offering a buy two, get one free sale on window treatments. That means custom window treatments, custom to your home. We're talking roller shades, honeycomb shades, Roman shades, you name it. They have it there for you to take a look at. They bring the product to your home, show it to you in your home, measure for you. The consultation is free. And the biggest thing about it, folks, is it's all in your home. We're not talking about, oh, let me go to the store. Maybe they'll give me a sample. Maybe I can take it into somewhere. We're talking about being able to bring this stuff right to you. And already, Michael, Miss Caitlin.
Caitlin's here.
She says she's a fangirl. So, Caitlin, how are you? Thank you for joining us. But make sure you're reaching out to Budget Blinds of East Greenbush and Budget Blinds of Hudson and Coxsackie, New York. Your number one place for window treatments, and let them know you're there to belly up to the bar. All right, it's all done, Michael. All that's
brilliant.
All right, all that's handled for now. So let's kind of get into this. So make sure I got this right. Navy vet. We'll find out what your rate was. We'll figure that out here in a minute. Like, see, that's one of those things. You got to speak the lingo, folks. Find out what your rate was. But you've been an actor, you've directed, you have your master's from Rutgers. What else do we got here? I'm adjunct professor at Paul College in New Hampshire. You've got SoHo Creative Studios, a co-founder there. Am I missing anything?
Oh, lots.
All right. Well, tell me what I'm missing then, brother.
No, nothing, man.
There's a lot there.
I'm a weird. I always like to say that if you try to make sense of my life path, you're probably going to injure yourself. I don't make any sense, man. To a rational mind, I guess. Maybe to an emotional mind, that might make sense, but not to a rational mind. Funny, you kind of took me back to high school. When you called the Navy guys the cab drivers, because A Few Good Men was one of my favorite films.
Great movie.
And Kiefer Sutherland's character, when Tom Cruise asks him, have I done something to offend you? And Kiefer Sutherland, as a captain or whatnot, or junior lieutenant, he's like, no, I love all you Navy boys. Every time we go someplace to fight, you fellas always give us a ride.
That's it.
That's it, man. And a bunch of movies, actually. Navy SEALs, which is so not true to life. Not a great film. Not a great film, but it was an inspiring film. So actually, in high school, I was a big screw up, man. A real big screw up. I barely graduated high school. Like I think I missed like 40 days of my senior year or something. Yeah.
40 out of 180. I mean,
it kind of, man. Yeah, it wasn't good. In fact, I don't really think. What's that?
I said, do the math, folks. That's over 20% of the time
it's a lot
that you missed. That's pretty good.
I think they really just wanted me out of there. So I kind of knew that college at the time wasn't in the cards for me, man. So I decided I was going to go into the military, and a buddy of mine and I signed up for the Navy, and we were going to be Navy SEALs because I saw the movie, and I saw A Few Good Men and Top Gun, and I knew it would be just like that they showed you. So I showed up to boot camp, and I realized very quickly that if you're going to be a Navy SEAL, you're not going to sleep at all, at least for a very long time. And sleep deprivation and myself do not get along. So that was right. And I'm sure as a Marine, I mean, forget about it, right? I mean, did they deprive you guys of sleep as well?
God.
I mean,
that was boot camp. That was just boot camp. Go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. By 8, you're up by anywhere between 4 to 5 in the morning. And probably somewhere in the middle of the night, you had to be woken up to stand an hour of fire watch. Yeah, all that shit. My thing, I tell you, you'll appreciate this. I recruited for 12 of my 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And I used to get these kids that would come in my office, and they'd be like, yeah, so I'm either going to join the Marine Corps, and I'm thinking like Force Recon or something like that. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. I mean, I think like one of those two, because, I play soccer, and I'm like, listen, kid, get out of my office first. And like that was the best recruiting tool I had, was get out of my office. And they'd be like, what? Like, get the fuck out of my office. I don't want you. Get away from me. But it used to be funny. They would tell me they're going to be Navy SEALs. And I would tell them, do you understand that that's like going and playing T-ball today and thinking you're going to be a New York Yankee tomorrow? And they would be like, what? I'm like, listen, those dudes are badass. I mean, and we're talking long before you have the David Goggins of the world that are like, just listen, I did everything. Like, hey, gotcha, David. You're an amazing dude. You're a psychopath, 100% psychopath. But I'm with you, brother. So you go off the Navy boot camp, you realize that, and that's a cold ass place too. Like, I'm gonna give you all that. Like, where we're sweating our asses off, y'all are frozen up there.
Dude, you know, it's funny. A lot of people might not know this, but Navy boot camp's in Chicago, which sounds weird because it's the U.S. Navy. So it ain't on the Atlantic Ocean, ain't on the Pacific Ocean. It's in Great Lakes, Illinois, which is like right on Lake Michigan. So yes, it was cold. It wasn't too bad, man. I went in September, so it wasn't too bad. But you know, long Navy story short, I got sent out to the fleet. I got assigned to the USS Detroit, which was a fast combat support ship, but it's really not a fast ship because it's just a big oil tanker. So so basically my ship fueled and supplied munitions to the rest of the fleet. So in the battle group, we were pumping fuel to the aircraft carrier, to the amphib ships that the Marines were on, or to the cruisers and so on. So we worked a lot. It was like one of the worst ships to get in the fleet. But I got it. And yeah, I got stuck behind a desk, and I thought to myself, I didn't sign up for the Navy for 4 years to be behind a desk. So every ship needed 2 rescue swimmers. Okay. So I was like, well, that seems like something I'd be interested in. So I volunteered for that. They auditioned, I guess that's what you call it, a bunch of guys. 2 of us got to go. I went down to Jacksonville, Florida for rescue swimmer school. And I came back to the ship as a rescue swimmer, which was really neat. Didn't do a lot of stuff. Us surface rescue swimmers are not as active as the guys in the helicopters. The aviation guys are going out all the time. But yeah, man, I you know, for anybody out there, the Navy was one of the best things I ever did, man. I certainly wouldn't be here with you right now if I didn't join the service.
I understand that completely. It's, you know, and I know what it was for me, but I got to ask this question before we move on to life afterwards. What was it for you that really, like, about the Navy that you kind of say, hey, this set me on today's path?
I just got goosebumps when you said that. You know, I don't know if it's exactly one thing, Sean, but here's like the things that come to mind. Well, first of all, I got very lucky in that one of my early captains on the ship was a former commanding officer of Top Gun. And I'll never forget it. So he was the guy that did the flyby in the F-14 in the original Top Gun.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. So this guy was a real he was a Cold War F-14 fighter pilot, man. And this guy was a badass. And when he came to, and I watched something happen. I watched something happen that was remarkable. When I got to the ship, it was, I got flown out. So I flew from Philadelphia to Sigonella, Sicily as a 19-year-old.
I know Sigonella.
Yeah.
I know Sigonella.
Okay. It was first from Spain.
What's the name of the bar there? The Penguin on Sigonella?
I mean, I've been there so many times, man. I forget what
it was. The E Club was the Penguin, which was so odd. In Sigonella, it was the Penguin, I think. Yeah.
On the base, right?
Yeah.
No, man. You're bringing back like memories.
Za Maddalena.
What's that?
Did you ever go to Za Maddalena?
I don't know if I have.
That was a sub-tender base. That was the only time we crossed deck between I was on the Pensacola. We pulled up next to it, and we had to cross their ship to get onto the shore. And they used
that, man.
There was Navy guys that had their license to run. They weren't LCACs, but they were like a civilian version to run people from this little tiny base over to the main shore in Za Maddalena, Italy. I'm sorry. I told you, man, we're going to make left turns into like service stories.
Yeah, man, I'm all for it. But to answer your question, so this guy came on the ship, and the nickname for the ship at the time was the Dirty D. And when I showed up at this ship, dude, I mean, it's almost as big as an aircraft carrier. Like, dude, and it was like this bucket of rust. And I literally, the first thing, so when I looked up the brow and I had to climb up this thing with my sea bag and this stuff, and the ladders on ships, if people don't know, I mean, they're like
scary.
This, man. Yeah, it takes you a couple days to understand that you actually go down front ways and you don't go, the instinct is to go down backwards so you don't die. but you actually go down frontways. And I remember looking at this ship, and the first thought in my head was, I'm going to die. I'm like, this is it. I'm done. And everybody was kind of miserable. It was like 3/4 of the way through a Mediterranean deployment.
Oh, they were ready to come home.
They were done, man. Like, and I was like, here's the new guy that rolls up 3/4 of the way through, didn't have to do the whole deployment. So they loved me. But yeah, so we got back and we switched captains. We had to change of command. And this guy came on board. And this guy was I learned more about leadership from this guy in like 6 months than I think I've learned since, man. And he said, we're not the dirty D anymore. We're the fighting tiger. And like, he's like, that's it. And he's like, we're not an oiler. He's like, we're a battle oiler. He's like, so if you think we're going to be hanging back while the missile destroyers are going up, he's like, no. We're going to be right beside them. And he whipped this ship into shape. And I'll never forget, like he made people very, very quickly really proud to be in the Navy and really proud to be on the ship. And everybody was at the top of their game with this guy. So for me, I learned about leadership and what that looked like from a guy who, and also, man, like, I mean, I know, this as a Marine, of course, like in real high stakes environments, like, a shipyard, I worked on the flight deck. That's one of the most dangerous places in the world to work. And like, mistakes are like people get, and as a rescue swimmer, they would tell us with the manual, they're like, every warning you read in here is written in blood. And we're like, what does that mean? As 19-year-old me, what does that mean? Like it means that someone was either killed or seriously injured as a result of this rule having to now be written, kind of thing. Yep. So being able to play at a high stakes, world-class high stakes environment as a 19-year-old. And then also I learned, man, that professionalism had nothing to do with your age or how much money you were making.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That is so hard to get people to understand. Folks, if you're just joining us right now, I know there's a few people out there. You can check Michael out on Instagram. That's probably the best place. He does have a LinkedIn also, but it's Michael Cinquino, Cinquino, and to make him feel better, Charlie India November, Quebec uniform India November Oscar. You can just to make him feel better. We're going to do this all night, folks. We're just going to talk just for the two of us. And if you're finding me through Michael or Michael through me, make sure you're giving us that like at heart, sharing this on your Facebook or your LinkedIn, wherever you're watching us, so that other people know that this is going on. It should be on every yard sales site that you can find so that they finally kick me off of all of them. So please take a moment and do those things. It's that important to me. So you're a rescue swimmer, but what was your actual rate, if you don't mind?
I was a PN, man. I was in personnel. I was a secretary.
Okay, so you're so what we would call an admin.
I was admin. Yeah, admin.
We call it 01 in the Marine Corps. And, and look, folks, that's a whole nother story. Maybe one day we'll get
it's an interesting story, and I'll tell you why that was. So if you were going to be a Navy SEAL, there was only, at the time, they have different ratings now, but if you were going to be a Navy SEAL, you had to qualify to be a certain rating. So when you took the ASVAB, which is like the SATs for the military, you get a certain score. And then they say, well, okay, you're smart enough to be, this rating. And I'm like, well, I want to be a Navy SEAL. So, so PN was the only thing that I qualified for. It was either that, or I almost went into the Marines to be an aviation electronics technician. I have no idea how I qualified to do that.
So that was my job, avionics on 53s. That's what I did. So I did my first 4 years as a motor team mechanic, broke everything I touched. I was horrible at it. But again, back to that 19-year-old, I was 19, probably didn't have as odd as it sounds, I didn't have the maturity level to fix things, as odd as that sounds. But when I moved on and re-enlisted and I went into avionics, my mindset had changed and I was a little more mature. I was in an artillery unit for my first 4 years. Very different mindset. But it's funny you talk about leadership. So leadership when you first came out, and I want to talk about that transition for a minute. And folks, we're going to get into generating meaningful attention to your brand, which is a huge thing for Michael, and this is where his driving force today is. But I want to talk about that leadership for a moment. Of what was your experience from a leadership standpoint? Because again, you talk about a Cold War Top Gun pilot, ice in that dude's veins. He lived in a world where he was flying on the edge of the bad guys and having to kind of push them back during a time where both sides, we've all done it, was trying to see, well, how far can I get into your personal space, to getting out and thinking, remember, you were an admin guy, you had millions, you had people's personal information. You knew more about personnel on that boat than probably the X or the CO did, because you saw it every day. To getting out, what was that transition for leadership like for you?
Well, my transition out of the Navy was very, very difficult. I was not aware of what anxiety or panic was. And I had my first full blown panic attack very soon after I got out of the Navy. So leadership kind of went out the window for me. And okay, so here's the thing, man, just to back up a little bit. I've suffered from anxiety my whole life, and I learned at a very young age, that age being 15, and I didn't know what anxiety was. I discovered alcohol. And thank you. I had to undiscover it eventually, but I do not. If you drink, you should enjoy your drink. So I started self-medicating when I was 15, not knowing that what I was basically doing was just, I was feeling anxious, so I'd have a drink. And I drank my way through high school, and then I got in the Navy, and I couldn't drink on the ship. So I was like, oh, how am I going to, and none of this is conscious, it's all subconscious. So I'm like, well, how am I going to survive? So I started to literally abuse exercise. And my resting heart rate was something like 44 beats a minute. And if you know anything about that, Lance Armstrong hangs out around 38. So,
so you were a PT junkie.
That's all I would do, man. Like I would so we'd have an hour for lunch. Well, I'd wake up in the morning and do it. I have an hour for lunch. I'd get right out of my uniform. I'd throw my shorts on. I'd blast on the bike or elliptical for like 30 minutes. I get right back into my uniform, pouring sweat, go to the mess hall, get food, and get right back to my desk. And then I would do workouts later. But yeah, I was a junkie, and that's when I left. I started drinking again. I was still, abusing exercise. And dude, I fell apart. I went right to college. So I went right to Penn State University, a satellite campus of Penn State. So when I got out, I was just kind of blinded by the anxiety, and I couldn't walk from like my car to class without having like a full-blown panic attack. And I didn't even know what was going on with me, man. I had no words for it. And when I finally was driving my car one day back from a pool, I totally hyperventilated. I thought I was dying. I called 911. The paramedics show up, and I don't know if you've ever been there yourself, but if you've ever been injured and you've looked up at people, you can tell either if they're worried or not. And you kind of get a sense of it, or you know what I'm saying? Have you ever been there?
How bad am I right now? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can kind of see if they're trying to play it cool and you're really screwed up, or you're this guy's good. I immediately sensed 3 guys, really great guys. They just go to me in the ambulance. They're like, man, sorry, we're going to have to chalk this up on nerves. And I was like, no. I was like Robert De Niro. I was like, I had a heart attack. I know I had a heart attack. And I get to the emergency room, and the doctor's like, no, you had a panic attack. It's anxiety. It's very common. And I didn't know what to do. And that began I was like, okay. I'm like, so what do I do? And that was really, I only bring that up and kind of override the leadership question because that was the most prominent thing that happened. And that began a journey of having to deal with that on my own without really any tools, except for exercise and alcohol.
But no, I get that. My first one, when I was on active duty, I didn't know what was going on. And I mentioned to a buddy of mine, Doc Correa. He was a PA in the Navy. I'll tell you his story. It's pretty impressive. But I said to him, hey, I'm having this problem. I'm having heart palpitations, getting shortness of breath. He goes, you're having panic attacks. I'm like, John, because we trained in Aikido together. I'm a staff sergeant at the time. I'm like, John, I'm not fucking panicking about anything. Do you not know who I am? He goes, listen, Murph, it's a panic attack. He goes, next time it happens, I want you to think about what you're thinking about. Meaning hey, this is happening. Think about it. And I did. And I went, son of a bitch. I had a kid on deck for processing. And I was like, okay, so this is what I got to figure out. And it was funny that you mentioned PT. I had an uncle who had it, and he had a doctor tell him that's one of the worst things you can do when having a panic attack is work out. He said, because you're now training your body that when you're having a panic attack, to run. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you right now that the best thing for me, at least that I've learned, is to do nothing with the panic attack.
Absolutely, positively. Because that's it. Don't do anything. Just
don't do
relax.
anything. It will pass, but don't run, don't fight, don't seek reassurance. And it's easy to say because the anxiety is telling you to run, to seek reassurance, and to do something. So, and especially as a male who likes to take action, the idea of doing nothing doesn't really seem to make any sense on a logical level. So, for anybody out there that suffers, I mean, we're all different, but learning to let go and do nothing it can be a way out.
You're absolutely right. So you go through this, you're going to college. What's your first, as we're getting closer to where we are today and, the SoHo creative and all these things, how do we start moving that direction?
Yeah. So I thought I wanted to study psychology because I was fascinated by human behavior. I met a girl at Penn State. I liked her. She was an actress. She said, I think you'd be a good actor. You should audition for this play. And I was like, well, if it's going to get me a date with you, I'll audition for the play. Sure. And it did. And I auditioned for this play, man. And I loved movies, but I never thought about acting. And I love cracking people up, but I never thought about a career in acting. And I got cast. I got cast in this play. It was a comedy. I did something on stage opening night. The audience laughed. They loved it. I felt what that felt like to receive that. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm changing my major. I'm going into acting. So I went and got an undergraduate degree in theater. And then on my way to New York to be an actor, I did this unified audition where you can audition for a bunch of graduate schools. And I didn't want to go to graduate school. And this is kind of leading into SoHo Creative and some of the work I do now, because I believe everything's kind of an audition. And the worst thing you can do in an audition is try to get the job. And I was going into this audition. I wasn't trying to go to graduate school, man. I was very well prepared. I had 2 good monologues. So I just went in the room and had a good time, not trying to hold on to the result, doing a good job, but not holding on to the result. And everybody in the room wanted to talk to me. And for someone that just came out of undergrad, where they're like, here's why you suck all the time, hearing people call me talented for the first time and awesome, that was, my head got huge. And this one school, Rutgers University, Deborah Headwall, is one of the better programs in the country. William Esper was still alive at the time. He was one of the best acting teachers in the nation for a long time. It was his program. I went into that class there. She invited me in to watch. I saw acting that I had never seen before in my life. This spontaneous, moment-to-moment, captivating acting in this just white room. And I was like, I'm coming here. So I did 3 years at Rutgers and got a master's degree in acting. Went right to New York City 2 weeks after graduate school. Did not make it as an actor at first. Fell heavily into drinking and all kinds of things. New York is there's a little meme for New York. It's like the Statue of Liberty with her arm around a guy, and she's like, "Hello, friend," and she's punching him in the face at the same time. So that's kind of my experience. It's like, come on over here, and like bang, right in the face. And then my life was kind of saved. A camera fell into my lap, a DSLR, a
Like
digital
physically
camera,
or like
kind of physically, like not from the sky, but someone gave me a camera. And I didn't know anything about photography, and I very quickly became obsessed with photography, like obsessed. And it was early 2000s in New York, so there's no Instagram, barely any Facebook. It's all kind of networking, real New York still. And I accidentally became a professional photographer for a decade in the city.
I love how you called it real New York. I love that terminology. Now, any of that on your at Michael Cinquino, Cinquino Instagram that people could see these photos?
Yep. A little bit of photography there. So
Like
so far,
like
yeah. Thank you for that. So and simultaneously, something else happened. I fell into something else, working with this kind of, I don't want to say secret, but it was kind of a non-advertised IT think tank. And I knew nothing, dude. I got theater degrees, man. I know nothing
Right.
about this. So I fell into working with this really high-end tech organization that did consulting for Fortune 70 chief
Oh,
information
wow.
officers and above. So like Boeing, Disney, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, like the biggest companies on the planet. So I didn't know what the heck was going on. My friend worked there. She's like, hey, we need a guy who like knows like hotels and restaurants. Because I was a waiter in New York for a lot of years. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Dude, I had no idea, man.
I've eaten
Like
sandwiches before. I know about food.
I've poured beers. I know. So I fell into this thing, and I learned about business, and I learned about tech consulting at the highest levels of commerce. I learned about technology and running a business and client relations, and it was kind of like a mini MBA, man. So I applied all that to my photography business, and we'll just jump ahead a little bit here. So
Right.
2020 comes along, and it's March of 2020. I have a studio rental business in SoHo. I'm a photographer, I'm a videographer, and I'm coaching people. I do presentation coaching, public speaking coaching. I've kind of parlayed my actor training to help people be more confident, clear, and compelling communicators. And I coach startup founders and CEO types and executives and stuff like this. I had all that going on for me. And then on March 18th or something like that, 2020, I closed the door to my studio and went inside our Brooklyn apartment and did not leave the front door for about 60 days.
Wow.
And the business went away because I was deemed non-essential by the state of New York, a non-essential worker. My partner lost her job. So we're sitting in our Brooklyn apartment that we just bought because what's going to ever happen in New York?
Right.
And then we were stuck there and could not work. We're not permitted to work. So I started to Google around to find other options. And, at the time, the restrictions were vastly different depending upon what state you were in.
100%. I was here in New York with you, so I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I Googled two things. This is above the bar, so I'll be above the bar.
Be above the bar about it. Let's do it.
I Googled two things. Now, the first thing I Googled are what are the states with the most respect for constitutional rights? Number one. And then the second thing I Googled
on that, I know that.
Yeah. And the second thing I Googled was what are the states that are best for small business growth? And New Hampshire kept coming up at the top of all these lists. So we visited New Hampshire in 2020, the summer. We're like, this is an interesting place. It was a real tough sell for my partner because she's a Queens girl. And going from the most diverse place on the planet to one of the whitest states in the whole, country, it was a big ask.
Yeah, that's definitely going from, because correct me, but that particular borough, isn't that the one that they say there's somebody from every nation on the planet there or something along those lines?
It's my understanding that there are more dialects spoken in Queens, the borough of Queens, than anywhere else on the planet Earth, period.
That's just,
isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's one of those ones where, and now you're in New Hampshire,
yeah,
where they have the true New England accent, like the truest form of the New England accent that you could possibly have. And wow. So now how does that become SoHo Creative?
Yeah. So my partner, Rebecca, and I, and a good friend, colleague, Taylor, we're all looking to kind of reinvent ourselves. And we kind of pooled our expertise. And Rebecca's a brilliant designer. Taylor's an incredible writer, PR person. I'm a great visual artist and storyteller. So we're like, why don't we birth a branding agency and see where that takes us? So that's what we did in 2020. We rebirthed SoHo Creative because SoHo Creative was originally a rental space in SoHo. We rebirthed the second iteration of SoHo as a branding agency. And as way leads on to way, man, we learned that we have a really good knack for helping brands communicate their value. Sometimes that's on a website. Sometimes that's through photos and videos. Sometimes that's through copywriting. Oftentimes it's all three of those things. And what we've really come into now, Sean, is something called employer branding, which is a little bit of a new term. Yeah, I know you tilted your head. That's what most people do.
I had to give it the nipper. That's the RCA dog, folks. I had to give it the nipper for a minute. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, most people haven't. It's the idea that you have to market as aggressively to potential employees as you would a potential client or customer. So
Okay.
it's like advertising to work for you, kind of thing. And when we
I love
live in a
that.
world, pretty cool, right? Yeah, no, it's something that we kind of stumbled into and realized that we had a knack for. So really, like, kind of bringing this thing to talking about how to attract meaningful attention. What we came to, Sean, is that I really believe that a thriving business, or even life for that matter, is the result of meaningful relationships. And the more meaningful your relationships, the better your life tends to be. And so then the question is like, well, what's a meaningful relationship and how do those happen? Well, those happen, I believe, through promises kept. I made a promise today to show up on your podcast at 8 o'clock, right? And I showed up. If I were not to do that, the likelihood that we'd have a meaningful relationship,
Slim to none. Slim's probably left the building. Yes.
yeah, that would be over. Especially because it's our first meeting. So we've learned that from a human science perspective, that it's actually better to make a promise and keep it than just to do a favor for someone.
What do you
So if
mean?
you want to, if you want to grow a relationship, it always means more for me to say, Sean, I'll see you at 8 o'clock, man, at the bar, and then show up, rather than me just showing up at your house with like a 6-pack of beer. There's something about making a promise, you going, okay, he's going to make this promise, and then keeping that promise, that does a really wonderful thing for human relationships. Now, so these promises come in many forms, and they have to be a couple things. They have to be measurable, and they have to be demonstrable, meaning that you have to show somebody that this thing happened. Pretty cool story. So we had a bat in our apartment.
Nothing cool about this so far. So we're not
Dude,
cool right yet. So let me hear this.
we had a bat in our apartment, and the exterminator shows up, and the name of the exterminating company was Pest End. And I was like, that is a demonstrable promise. Your promise to me is that you're going to come in and end any pest.
My best problem. Right.
Yeah. So basically what happened, meaningful relationships happen because a promise is kept. Well, then, so where do we come in, and how do you generate meaningful attention? Well, how do promises happen? We'll take our relationship right now, man. We reached out to you. We saw your podcast. I was like, this guy's cool. Let's see if we can get on the show. So we had to communicate to you and say, hey, this is who Michael is. This is the stuff he talks about. If this is of interest to you, here you go. So how you communicate a promise, or how you communicate in an efficient, effective, and compelling manner, is going to get you kind of in the door.
Huge. It's funny you mentioned about the time and everything, and look behind the curtain. Most people don't realize that most of my guests, I don't like. We might email back and forth, but we've never talked until this moment. And it's some people don't. When I explain it to them, they're like, "Why don't you?" I don't want to. And they're like, "Why don't you want to?" Because I want to be as surprised with the stories as you are. If I already know the stories, I don't want to hear it. But at the same time, I've had guests where we're up to the last minute, and Nate's got a question for you. I'll throw it out there in a minute. But Nate's a good friend of mine. Cody's a good friend of mine, where I've had to reach out to them, and they've got great contacts, or they're great guests, where I'm like, what are you doing right now? And they're like, put my PJs on and getting ready for bed. No, you're not. You're coming on a podcast. And they're like, oh shit. Because people, but I will, and I promise you, if somebody said to me, hey, would you have this person on as a guest? No. There's a guy right now who blew me off and tried to get me to change the time. He probably got about 1 million or some downloads. If he asked me to come on my show now, I'd be like, nah, man, we good. And I don't give a shit because this is mine. So, I mean, I understand 100%. But now, Nate, I'm going to ask your question in a minute. What I'm curious, though, is how do you market this to companies? Because I think that's the biggest thing. As somebody, remember, I told you I did staffing. I was a business development director for a staffing firm. I now own my own company. I'm thinking of somebody coming to me and be like, hey, I can show you how to market your brand so it gets more meaningful attention. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell does that mean? Like, how do you market this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if a business cannot hire effectively, that business cannot grow.
Fact.
So how can you hire effectively? Well, there's a few ways to do it. You can put ads up on Indeed. That's one way to do it. You can kind of throw, cast a large net. You can use recruiters, which can work. But that recruiter isn't as invested because they're really a third party kind of thing. Or you can communicate your value as a company as effectively as possible. And when you do that, you're going to naturally attract the people that are meant to be within your organization and then repel the people that are not. And just to share a little bit about our process and how that works. So the first thing we do employer brand videos, so hiring videos. So if it was your company, Sean, we would interview and survey all your employees and go, why do you work here? If you're selling it to a friend, what are the top 5 reasons? What's the most important thing to you? How long have you been here? And we get a whole bunch of data. We're doing a video for the city of Portsmouth, for the municipality, so they can hire better for the city. And we had 95 people fill out this survey, handwritten stuff. It's not just yes or no questions. And we take all that data and analyze it. And we can tell you exactly, these are the 3 reasons, the average reasons why everyone agrees why this is a great job. From there, you can do whatever you want with it. So you're putting that out. So you know that your current employees value this, 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 and this. So part of meaningful relationships is sharing what you value. So if you share what you value and what your values are as a company, you're naturally going to attract the people that value those same things. And one of the things that companies think about is that, well, I can't pay. Believe it or not, pay is no longer one of the top things. Once you reach a certain level of pay, people don't even care how much money they're making. They'll stay for half the money if there's meaning in their work, if they feel like what they're doing is making a difference, if they have a sense of team and teamwork and community. So really, the thing that I always say to employers on kind of how to sell it, I said, okay, what is the experience like for somebody who's going to work for you? What happened? I go, I send your resume. What happens? I go, anything? I go, did they get an email back? No. I go, that's a missed opportunity. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, if I email you for a job and you don't email me back, even though you might not be hiring me, that's a marketing opportunity. So I email you and I go, look, you're not right for this role, Sean, but in the future you might be, and please keep in touch. We know that sending out an application took a really long time for you. We know that the job search is really, really hard, and we want you to know that we got your application and we value your time. Now, let me ask you a question. If you got a rejection like that back from a company,
I would mean, because it shows, and this is such a big thing. And as I was leaving staffing, it shows that the employer is empathetic, not sympathetic, but empathetic to, hey, I'm looking for a job. I'm putting the effort into this. You're at least respecting my time and effort to reach out to you. That's huge. Yep. Absolutely. I don't know if Shane and Eric are still out there. They're 2 friends of mine that are still in that staffing world. Okay. Have you ever thought about reaching to staffing firms? I'm just curious. I think this would be amazing for a staffing firm.
Yeah. So this is still kind of new stuff, man. And there's only one other company that we know of that does this, but they do it at the enterprise level. They're called Blue Ivy up in Toronto, but they work with like H&M and very large brands. We want to work with small businesses. And we want to help small businesses hire, because a lot of so we work with a software development firm. They're not Google. They're like a family business, man. So they can't pay $800,000 a year for engineers. They just can't do it. They don't have the budget. So they have to do other things to attract people. And they do a really, really, really good job of it. So we want to be able to help the smaller companies, the companies that don't have, 20 billion a year in revenue, attract talent. And I think there's kind of like an awakening happening, and people are realizing that small business and working for a small business is really can be kind of preferred to working for a big company. And you can really see the impact of what you're doing in a small business, whereas in a big company, it's hard to see like what the impact is. I got to say one thing before I forget and before we run out of time. So communicating that value, at least in the moment, and to be, a clear and compelling communicator, you have to do 2 things at the same time. You have to be predictable in structure and unpredictable in delivery. Actors are the gold standard of this. So as an actor, for those of you that can't see, I'm holding up a script. These were my lines. That's the structure. I'm been told what I'm going to say as this character. I cannot deviate really from what my lines are. So there's a predictable structure. Now, I cannot decide ahead of time how our scenes, Sean, if you and I are going to do a scene together, like, the way that you run your podcast is absolutely brilliant, because here we are being unpredictable in delivery. I had no idea what we're going to talk about.
That's nobody ever knows what I'm going to say, but that's a whole nother
Probably
thing.
why you're, one of the many reasons your listeners love you, because but there is a structure, right? So you started with an intro, we did this there, you want to honor the sponsor, there are questions so there is some sort of structure. We're not just like all over the place.
Right.
But within that structure, you and I are having this wonderful moment-to-moment conversation where I don't know even what I'm going to say next, let alone what the host is going to say next. So that can make things really compelling. I think that's one of the big reasons why shows like yours and these longer form podcasts do so well nowadays. When in this time when everything is so fast and we have no attention, how the heck are people listening to hours? And right, it's like counterintuitive.
It really is. And it's funny you say that, because we are getting close to closing the bar here soon. So everything about, and again, folks, I want to remind folks, it's at Michael Cinquino, Cinquino on Instagram, on LinkedIn, reaching out to Michael. If you've got a small business or you've got a company, like I said, I don't know if Eric and Shane didn't message me, so they may not be on. They work for the staffing firm I used to be the business development director for. This is the type of thing, and this is a new approach into this that I find very interesting, that I could have sold. And I'm going to just tell you, as a business development director, I would have sold this to to companies that if they came, as I'm going into them saying, hey, I can help you find that engineer, staying with that for a minute, that you can't find. And one of the things I'm going to do is not just post you on LinkedIn like everybody does, not just post it on Facebook like everybody does. Oh, yes, I've got a network like everybody does, but I'm going to create this video talking about your culture and how to reach out, and we're going to supply that. That's so fucking huge. That would be monstrous for finding those jobs.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and this might not work, but how long were you in the Marine Corps?
20 years.
When you look back on those 20 years, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Camaraderie.
That was right.
100%. That's the Marine Corps. That's everything
people,
about it.
People. Yeah. You didn't say your weapons. You didn't say the food. No. You didn't say this. You didn't even say travel or action or anything.
Travel and adventure.
Travel. They told me it's not just a job; it's an adventure. That was the added for the Navy. But that's my point, man. When you look back on and I remember the names: James Curran, Tony Zimmerstein, Jimmy Searfoss. The guy I went to boot camp with called right before I got on the podcast. I can't wait to call him. We haven't spoken in a while. We went to boot camp together. We were in high school, went to boot camp together. So the point I bring that up because at the end of the day, if people don't know who you are, it's very difficult to attract the kind of people that your organization might need. And if you're hearing this, you have a business. And put yourself in the shoes of someone that's looking to work for you. When they go to your website, is there anything there at all that might indicate who you are and what you value? Sure, there might be an about page, but telling people that it's a 100-year-old company that your father had or whatever doesn't really say a whole lot. And I give you a pretty good example. If you go to sharpusa.com, we didn't do the work for them, but sharpusa.com, it's Sharp Electronics, very, very large company. You look at above the fold, they have like employee or something like it's their employer branding. And when you go to their employer, sharpusa.com, and it says join our winning team. When you click on explore career opportunities, it's their employer brand. And it talks about who you are. And they have a little video there. They have an employer brand video. It's not Marvel level, video. It doesn't have to be. It's just some of their employees talking about why they enjoy working for Sharp. And the point I make is that people are going to see themselves in these other human beings. And that is a very, very, very powerful thing. We pour into movie theaters. We spend millions of hours on our devices watching actors because we see ourselves in these characters. So it's really just applying that to real life and going, he's kind of like me, or she's kind of like me. I have a similar story. I came right out of school, So it's like that leveraging, and it's meaningful. And you know what the thing I love most about it, Sean? It's not bullshit, man. You're not selling, you're not bullshitting people. You're just being honest about who you are and what you value. And you cannot fail when you do that. I really believe that.
I'm with you now. I'm going to say you've never had one of these, and I'm going to get Nate's question out here. I'm going to say you've never had this before, but we'll see. Nate wants to know, do you have a favorite MRE?
So we didn't have MREs, man,
I knew it.
but yeah. um, yeah, brother. We had the mess deck, man, and we ate all our foods on board the ship. And when I was on shore duty, very very briefly, for 8 weeks at a specialized school, there was a mess hall, but no MREs. We did not have to rough it like the Marines. All of our food was at least sort of cooked.
Their roughing it was Steel Beach picnics and beer on the pier. That was roughing it. That was roughing it. So I mean, all these things that you guys got going on, I mean, it's really incredible to me because I got to tell you, Michael, I really love the vibe to it because it's bringing, like, I've had I'd be the first to admit it, I've had a tough struggle personally with the new work mindset.
Can you talk a little bit on that, man?
Well, what I mean by that is I still come from the mindset of, have you ever read the book Napoleon Hill's Laws of Success?
I've read I read Think and Grow Rich by him, but not
Think
that
and
one.
Grow Rich is his. He also has another book called Laws of Success. And Laws of Success are 16 rules to truly get your shit together. And if you read this, I mean, and I spend a lot of time in the car, so I end up listening to a lot of books. But one of the things he talks about that I see, and I'm curious how an approach would be with what you guys do is, and it's like rule 9 or something like that. And it basically says, do more than what you're paid for. Do more than what you're paid for, and eventually you will get paid more than what you do. And I honestly believe that. I believe that as a Marine, I was trained to do the job of the rank ahead of me. And I didn't get paid to be an E8, but I did the work of an E8 as an E7 so that I could do that job. And eventually somebody would see me and say, hey, he's ready for that. But we've lost that as a culture, I believe, because everybody says, well, it's not my fucking job. It's not my job. I'm not doing that. You don't pay me to do that. So then we lose that, and people don't understand, why aren't you getting promoted? Or I saw a thing the other day that said employees should only stay at a job for 2 years because after 2 years, you're losing your wealth value to where you could be paid more. And I think, again, that's because you're not doing more than what you're asked for. So then no one thinks you're worth paying you more or promoting you or raising you up. So how do you guys translate that for a company that says, hey, stick with us, we're going to do this for you? Does all that make sense, or did I get real?
Yeah, no. I was pulling something up to read it. I mean, for me, the question that I've learned to ask is, how can I be useful? And or is it useful? So in the new work world, to leave, I mean, there is something to be said about a lot of experience leaving every 2 years. But I think maybe really, man, it all comes down to values. And one of our clients is a very large construction firm in Massachusetts that built things like the Dartmouth Fieldhouse and part of Fenway Park, and they got a guy there that's been there 30 years, man.
Right.
So I think really the door swings both ways, in that if you're an employer, you need to do what you can to make sure that if someone gives you 20 years or 10 years, you can continue to keep them on. I know things happen, man. And as a business owner myself, like, anything can happen, and like, you might have to lay everybody off through no fault of your own.
Right.
But I really feel like, I mean,
I got to get you in with Patrick Hyalinsky.
Please. I don't know who that is, though.
I know. I'll get you in.
I mean, I guess the short answer for me is, like, there's a quote. Okay, so I guess and I looked it up while you were speaking. One of our rules, we steal this, and I think it's from McKinsey or some big consulting firm, But one of our kind of principles at SoHo is that, and this, I'm reading this, we will only undertake an engagement if we can agree to our mutual satisfaction that the value we are creating is greater than the price our client is paying. Meaning that you believe that whatever you paid, you're going to get at least more than that and not the same level. So the money that you're giving us is going to equate. Now, Sean, as a creative, that sometimes can be difficult to measure, man.
Right.
It can be difficult to go, well, here it is. At the same time, it sometimes isn't difficult to measure, and you can see the reflection of what you're doing. But I really feel like asking how you can be useful and trying to be as useful as humanly possible. One of my own personal principles is to be useful in spite of obstacle and grateful in spite of circumstances, which is easy to say, especially if something really goes wrong, to be like, oh, it's grateful that this terrible thing happened to me. But I really have learned to try to reframe things. And when I meet somebody, how can I be useful to Sean? What can I do for him? How can I be useful to this other human being who's running a show? How can I be a good guest? What can I talk about?
But you get it returned to you.
But that's the thing. It comes back automatically because the value you have in your own life is in direct proportion to the value you add to the lives of others. And the more value you add, the more valuable you become. I really believe it. Now, I understand there's ungrateful companies out there and people that, you might be making this or that. You really should be making a lot more. But, bouncing from thing to thing to thing and chasing dollars, I mean, I guess that works, but I don't even know any very wealthy people who are just sitting around.
No. Look, no, not at all. But it's funny you say this, and I'm a very faith-based person, always have been, and this is something that came up just recently, and it's funny in what you say. Moses asked God, "What's your name?" He said, "I am." And if you think about that, and we're all told you're made in the image of God, so I am you, I am whatever you say I am. And that's what this is. When I hear what you're saying right now, it's I am. If I go to work and I say, I am valuable, I am going to be a help, I am going to support these people, I am going to get better. That's what you're going to get back from that process is I am getting this back. I am having this handed to me. I am part of this. I love this mindset, Michael. I absolutely love it.
We have a lot in common, man. I really truly believe, and when I learned this, it was terrifying. You will only get what you reflect out into the world.
100%.
So whatever you're reflecting out into the world, that's exactly what you're going to get right back in your face. So no matter what your circumstances are, if you're reflecting out negativity and poison and this, that's exactly what's going to come back to you. And it sucks, but that's a law of the land. And then speaking of faith, I was introduced to an expression just recently, a very, very simple expression that really blew my mind. And I write it on my planner every day. And it's from Joan of Arc. And she says, act and God will act. And I remind myself, act, and bringing it full circle to acting, it's lights, camera,
action.
Think about it. Doubt yourself, bitch, complain. No. And it's like, do something. And it's like, I tell this to my students, my undergraduate students, act, do something. Well, I don't know. A Navy SEAL said, if you don't know your purpose, act as if you have, seek until you find it. But until then, act as if you have it because you're just wasting time.
So I got one for you.
Please.
You can tell this to all your students. Probably plenty of things from the Marine Corps, but one of the biggest things the Marine Corps ever taught me is the only wrong choice is not making one. There's no such thing. Like too many people get wrapped in it. Well, I don't want to make a mistake right here. This is going to, the only wrong decision is not making one. I don't know if I should kick this door and there could be a bad guy behind it. You better kick that sumbitch in right now and come out guns a-blazing, or step back and let a javelin enter in before you do.
May I reflect back to you and bring 100%. The Marine Corps and creativity together with another quote?
100%.
There is nothing that will keep you from being creative so quickly as the fear of making a mistake.
Amen. Listen, folks, Michael and I could probably talk and give you all kinds of different quotes and other shit that we've heard over the years. There's that one. Don't come to me with problems. Come to me with solutions. All the other shit that was said to me over the years. Most of it started with, "Hey, devil dog." And for him, it was probably, "Hey, shipmate." That's how our lives started for a long time. And then we figured out, I don't want you to call me that no more. So we figured things out. So listen, go check out, if you're listening to the audio version of this, make sure you check it out. Michael Cinquino, Cinquino at Instagram, on LinkedIn. Give him a like, give him a follow. It may sound cliche. I say this every week, but as cliche as it sounds, to like, share, follow, subscribe, do all those things to what we have going on. I know you watch the kids, your nieces, your nephews, your own children, and they're like, share, follow, subscribe, hit that like button. I know it sounds cliche, but listen to me, folks, that they understand how these algorithms work. We understand how these algorithms work. You taking the time and doing that is how people find us. It's how people find Michael. If you're finding me through Michael and Michael through me, please do that for me. Go on to Apple, give me a 5-star rating, give me something going on here. Go on to Facebook, give the show a follow, see what we've got going on. If Nate's still hanging out, Nate's going to love next week's show. We have on next week a young lady by the name of Gemma. She goes by Gemma Ringside. She is, and this is going to be a weird one because I drink. She's like 14 or 15 years old. I know her family, but she is the youngest manager in professional wrestling.
Wow.
And that you want to talk about, you know what? Let me grab the bull by the horns and make it happen. This young lady, I met her at the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame inductions. She was there with her mom and her dad. I was like, you're incredible. So we're going to have her on next week, and she's going to talk to us about what does it mean at that age to be mentored by true legends, people that paved the way back when women weren't able to do these things, or if they were, they better be a face and they better be an outfit and all these things. And this young lady is coming out guns a-blazing to make it happen. Now, Michael, again, we talked about this. This is episode 221. We figured it out before the show. So I know you've watched all 220 other ones. Don't log off right away after this is over. We got to talk for a minute. Now, we do this on every episode, on every show. The guest always gets the final word. So before we log off, what's our final word?
Act as if you have faith, and faith will be given to you. But you got to act.
Alrighty, folks, be sure to push your stool in. This has been a Second Front podcast presentation found on Apple, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found.